Hi, my name is Chris Escher. I'm the pastor here at Grace Lutheran in Port St. Lucie, Florida. We had a recording failure actually 2 weeks in a row, and so I figured it would be best if I came in on Monday and recorded it again. And this is the last Sunday in Advent, is when the sermon was. And our Advent sermon series was called Family Life, the Best and Worst. The Christ family in the best and worst of times is what it was called. And today we're talking about Joseph and fear and the open door. Now, since we're talking about fear, I think one of the first things some of us may think of is roller coasters. Now, I personally love roller coasters, and when I was a little guy, I wanted to ride roller coasters as much as I could, and I had to wait till I was tall enough to be able to get on them. But my friend Mark was the exact opposite. In fact, there's a story that he told me about when he was in 6th grade. He and a friend were hanging out in his house, and his friend was like, "Oh, roller coasters are amazing. We need to go to Busch Gardens and ride them together. We need to ride Kumba together." And my friend was like, "Oh no, I can't, I don't like roller coasters," is what he said. And my friend's best friend at the time said, "Yeah, whatever. Prove it." And he goes, no, I don't like roller coasters, and I don't like to ride them. He said this, essentially trying his best to slam the door shut on the conversation, to slam that thing shut. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, is that sense of where we sometimes slam the door shut. Because I think there's 3 things that we do with doors when it comes to our fear. One is we may slam the door shut, like my friend just tried to do. The other is we close the door slowly, and the other one is we leave the door open to our fear. So getting into our Bible study today, we see that in the end of Matthew chapter 1, we see that Joseph has realized something. Joseph, from the Christmas story, that his fiancée is pregnant, right? Like his fiancée is pregnant. Now, can you imagine what your feelings would be for the situation if your fiancée got pregnant? You probably wouldn't be happy, would you? And I think Joseph had very similar feelings. And he's like, oh yeah, sure, God did it, whatever. Like Brenda down the street said exactly the same thing, right? Yeah, that's, you said that God did it to her as well. And so he would have been extremely upset. And the first inclination would be what the culture expected him to do. And you know what the culture expected them to do? It was to stone Mary. Stone Mary and her adulterous relationship. Because what we see in John chapter 8, we see a very similar situation where the Pharisees are actually trying to trick Jesus. But what they do is they bring a woman found in adultery, and they go up to Jesus and they say, in Moses' law, which is we can find in Deuteronomy, it says for us to stone her. We have evidence. The culture back then was very harsh on people committing adultery. And I know what you're saying. You're like, whew, man, I'm glad that I don't live in such a barbaric society. Right? We say this sometimes. We look back in the past. We're like, man, I'm glad I don't capitulate and am part of such barbarism, such terrible stuff, that I would just take glee and want to destroy and eviscerate someone else. Well, it's funny you say that, because in the last year, my Facebook feed has been filled with stories that have the word eviscerate and destroy all through them. I mean, one of them said, Richard Dawkins destroys Donald Trump. And it said some Obamacare Obamacare truther or something like that eviscerates somebody else. Sean Hannity eviscerates Glenn Beck. Like, it's all these news stories that talk about us taking glee in destroying them, destroying the other party. And that's the thing. Like, there's an issue that's talked a lot about on the news right now about fake news. And all of these sites that I looked up, and I just searched Facebook for the word eviscerate, and they came up with all of these fake news stories. And they're all really one-sided on your politics. And they're all talking about how this one person absolutely destroyed or eviscerated somebody else. They all talk about that. And I know what you're saying. You're like, how in the world is that the same as actually stoning someone? Well, we have to ask ourselves, why are these fake news stories so popular? Why are they such a big deal? The truth is they're such a big deal is because we take glee and satisfaction when someone that we agree with destroys someone that we would describe as an enemy. We're not that different. We take glee in the utter destruction of someone else. We take glee in it. And in those things, they're designed to just slam the door shut. Joseph wanted to come in, and the culture wanted him to just slam the door shut on Mary and on our people that we describe as rivals and as people who disagree with us politically. We want to slam the door shut on them. And I tell you, I don't know this because it hasn't happened, but I have a feeling that if Jesus came like he did in biblical times, we would, as a culture, as a people, would most likely slam the door shut on him. I don't think we're any better than they were then. We would have found a way to get rid of Jesus. We would have slammed the door shut. So my friend wanted to slam the door shut on this riding roller coaster business. What we don't know is his dad was actually listening to his conversation. And a couple months later, the family did the family pilgrimage to Busch Gardens. And my friend's dad said to him, "Hey, I heard you talking to your friend the other night, and I heard that you just don't like roller coasters." He says, "It doesn't have anything to do with you being afraid, does it?" And my friend knew that he was caught, right? He was caught. And his dad and his father goes, "We're going to ride Kumba together today." And they get out to the ride, and my friend is shaking. He's visibly scared. And he goes up to Kumba, and they get in the ride, and his dad goes, "We're not just going to ride the ride. We're going to get on the front of the roller coaster," which is like a special ride, which is even, which is even a better part, because I love roller coasters. But my friend was just trying the whole time in line, trying to figure out a way to not, to just slowly close the door on this ride, to be sensible. Maybe just when they get up to the roller coaster, he's like, "I don't want to do it," and just keeps on walking past the seats, and just walks through the train. Like that, he's like, "I don't want to do it. I just want to slowly close the door." And that's what we see with Joseph and Mary. Because we see that Joseph actually just wanted to close the door. He just wanted to just slowly close the door, right? So we see this in Matthew chapter 1, verse 19. It says, "And her husband Joseph, being a just man," in other translations it says, "being a righteous man, he was unwilling to put her to shame, and so he resolved to divorce her quietly." Joseph's a good guy. He's a righteous guy. He realizes that this is a tough situation that he's in, but he's a good guy. So he just wants to slowly close the door. Not make a big scene, not make you like bring a bloodbath or anything like that. Like, he just wants to close the door. I think that's us all the time. Like, I think we're generally decent people, right? We look at the violence around us in the world of all the people slamming the door shut and others, and there's maybe a sense to us that loves that slamming the door shut. But at the end of the day, we're like, listen, I'm just not the slamming of the door type. I like to keep it like in me, right? I like to keep it part of myself. And so we just close the door in the situations. And we do this all the time. We have someone that says something that offends us, and we just shut the door on the situation, and we never talk to them again. We may be a member of a clubhouse or something like that, and somebody does something which we don't like, and so we just close the door in the situation. Perhaps we've been part of churches in the past, and the pastor said something, or the elders said something, or just somebody did something we didn't like, and so we just, rather than making a big scene, we just close the door in the situation and never show up there again. We do this stuff all the time. Our neighbor does something to us. I mean, I've had neighbors which I had a hard time loving, right? I had a hard time being around them, and they would say something, and they would not. I would try to reach out to them, and they wouldn't just accept it right away. And I was like, oh, well, I tried, and I was just close the door, just silently close the door, and never talk to them again. We do this all the time because our fear says they're never going to accept you. They're never going to hear your side. They're never going to change. And your fear is you don't actually want to change either, right? So in our fear, we just close the door. That's just what we do. We do it all the time. And it's fine. I think it's not a bad thing. After all, Joseph was a righteous man, right? But he wants to just close the door. So back to the roller coaster. My friend just wants to close the door. When he was at home, he wanted to slam it shut. Now he just wants to close the door. And now his father is making him ride on this ride. And they get on the ride and he gets strapped in. And here's what I love about roller coasters. Here's what I absolutely love. Is that if you are scared at all, roller coasters do nothing to assuage your fear. You get strapped into this harness, and then you go up, and when you're going up the ride, it makes this ratcheting sound. And the truth is, they could make that ratcheting sound quieter, but they don't. The ratchet, it's like click, 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 click. Like it's so loud, it shakes the entire train to come up. And my friend said that he was holding onto the grip so tightly on the roller coaster that his hands had turned completely white. He was just in fear over that as his father watched, right, all this stuff. And he gets up to the top, and it's just like click, click, click. And then that last click right before the coaster releases and goes down here, it's like that click. And it just goes down. And at the bottom of the first hill, my friend said, I was hooked for life. And he loved it. And he screamed gleeful, joyous screams the entire ride. Oh, because his father had pushed him, right? And some of you, that's a little too on the nose, right? Anyway, the door was wide open to all the roller coasters in the world then. And we see if our reading again, Joseph goes through something very similar. So verse 20, which is right after what we just read, it says, But after Joseph had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. An angel comes up to him and says, do not be afraid. Now think about this for a second. First off, we have to talk about that word angel for just 1 second. When we say angel in the Old and New Testament, that word means messenger. Okay? We just transliterated it like it was a name, like David or something like that. And we put angel on top of it. It just means messenger, okay? So what you could actually say is that your United States postal worker, when he or she comes to your house, you could go down to them and go, "You're my angel. You're my personal angel." And then you can watch as they slowly close the door on you, right? Anyway, so the messenger of the Lord comes to Joseph and says, "Do not be afraid, because this is from God." Essentially, this messenger from the Lord is saying, don't close the door because of your fear. Don't close the door. Leave the door open. Which is an amazing thing to have that messenger say, to have the Lord say that don't close the door. Because it's not like Joseph's life was any easier because of it. I mean, not a year later, they were having, as a family, going to have to flee for their lives to Egypt. Like, walking through that open door doesn't mean the life's going to be easy. But because that door was open and Joseph walked through it, he got to raise the boy that was named "The Lord Saves." It's beautiful. And I think the messenger is beckoning us too. I think we're connected to Joseph in this, is that the messenger is saying, don't fear. Don't fear. Leave the door open. Leave that door open to Jesus and God and what they want to do in your life. Because our fear, we always want to close those doors. But the messenger's going, keep it open. Don't fear. And how do I know it's saying that? Because it's a consistent message all the way through the Gospels. Is don't fear. Don't fear. But the thing is that just like Joseph, there's no guarantee that our lives are going to be any easier if we walk through that door. I mean, we may see some really cool things. We may see a blind man receive his sight. We may see water that's flowing like wine. We may see a scary guy that's filled with demons that the townspeople have pushed to the outskirts of the city. We may see a very vicious storm and somebody walking on water to it. And we may see some crosses along the way. This is what in Psalm 23 in the Old Testament calls walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But it says, after that, it says, I will not fear, right? Because you are with me. And right after the messenger says to Joseph, you're going to name him Jesus, which means the Lord save. It says, because the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Just like that walking through the valley of the shadow of death. The Lord is with us. So, don't close the door. The Lord is saying, don't fear. But the beautiful part is that because the door is open, see, God just keeps knocking that door open. We may get scared and we are trying to shut it. We're trying to shut it, but the Lord just keeps knocking that door open to us, beckoning us to come through it. Like he just keeps knocking it open and knocking it open. And because the reason why he keeps knocking it open is because through that open door, we find a resurrection. We find the fullness of all things. So God has opened his door to you. And God's messenger is telling us, don't close that door. Do not fear. Emmanuel has come, God with us. And he is here. So we can rest in him. We can listen to our fathers because fathers know best, right? Listen to a father. And we can walk through that open door and we can enjoy the ride with squeals of delight, right? Cool. Well, that's the sermon today. Have peace. Amen.